Hello and welcome to episode 12 of the Council Forcecast. With me today is Evan Nova,
Hello.
Jen Sarai,
Greetings.
and Antoine Bandelet.
Hello.
We have all four of us. Again, this is a rare occurrence
Four.
now. Today we're going to be reviewing the adventures of the Free Ryloth movement, otherwise known as Lords of the Sith.
Yeah.
It is the second to last book in this quote-unquote new canon chain. You know, of all the ones that were announced originally.
Yes, and
No, this,
overall
this,
views
this is
of
actually
it?
the last one from the very beginning of the announcements, which were
No, it
just,
was
just
no, it was.
Dark Disciple
it
wasn't
was
announced
new
at this point.
I'm pretty sure it was.
It was not. It was announced later on. Believe me,
I
I'm the
don't
news
recall.
guy. I know this
I'm sorry. I was just asking. Well, even if it was pretty damn close.
because the sampler was A New Dawn, Heir to the Jedi, Tarkin, and
This.
and this. Those are the four samplers.
Our
Well,
basic
okay, well,
view.
I guess it just feels like it. Dark Disciples in there because it was announced very.
It was announced
soon
right,
after.
right after. Yeah,
Like
it was.
right there. So
Mhm.
you could
Okay,
easily see.
guys. Let's just
Sorry,
talk
sorry,
about the
sorry.
book.
Okay, so our basic overview of this one isn't quite as favourable as the others, is it? If I'm
Nah.
correct.
For a book that calls
comparison,
itself
it's-
Lords of the Sith, it has remarkably little to do with the Lords of the Sith.
Yes, there's a lot more focus shifting on other characters in this different story. The title is very misleading. Very
Yeah.
misleading.
Do you guys all say your points? Ready? Did you have another point to put in?
No, sorry, that's fine.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I actually disagree with that assessment. I think some people were taking, or not these people, but you guys in particular were taking the title to mean just Vader and Palpatine in terms of just like a dedicated story to them or something like that. When really, I believe it is more of a representation of what the Lords of the Sith are within this galaxy. Yes, we do get the interpersonal relationship with Vader and Palpatine, which we do get very well, and I thought was done like splendidly, but we also get what these Lords of the Sith mean, how powerful they are, and how impossible it is of a task to beat them.
Before
Go
we
ahead.
before we get into opinions like that, Antoine, I'm not trying to criticize or anything. Let's go over general story first, and then get into how we feel like we did last time, because just so the audience knows what we're talking about.
Okay.
Who wants to give you want to give a bio like you did last time, Connor? You were pretty good at that before.
Okay, well then, just to give you guys a quick breakdown, this takes place about 7 years after Revenge of the Sith, and yeah, it's generally just kind of dealing. It's basically Vader and Palpatine reacting to Cham Syndulla's. And as I said, it has remarkably little to do with the Lords of the Sith. It's mostly just focused on everyone else doing their own schemes and talking about the Lords of the Sith rather than. Yeah, and I think I'd better just stop there because otherwise I'll start spewing out my own opinions. Because really, I gotta be honest, I found this book to be a bit of a drag. Like Heir to the Jedi, I blasted through that book in a heartbeat. I loved it. I was reading it at every opportunity because I enjoyed it so much. This book, it took me effort to get through it because the problem is it was dealing with so many things that I just didn't care about.
Well,
You know-
okay, yeah. Callan.
Well, I thought we were talking about the plot summary, sorry.
Well, we just finished. Okay, so that's the plot summary. So basically, in a nutshell, there's this uprising on Ryloth led by Cham Syndulla, who you remember from what was the title of the episode he first appeared in? From TCW.
Anis-
Uh,
Well, it
Battle
wasn't,
over
it
Ryloth.
wasn't supply
Storm,
lines. that
Storm
was the
over
third
Ryloth,
episode.
and then it went down to it, didn't it?
Yeah, so
Storm
those
over Ryloth, Innocence of Ryloth. I can't remember what the last one was called.
supply
Ryloth
lines.
trilogy from. Just call it the Ryloth.
It was
trilogy
season one.
Yeah.
From season one.
So you'll remember Cham Syndulla from those episodes. He was basically the leader of this movement of Twi'leks who basically, and they eventually succeeded in overthrowing Wat Tambor with the help of Mace Windu. So he, previously established character, and what he's doing in this book is he's essentially doing the same thing he was doing in those episodes. Instead of fighting the Separatists, he is now attempting to free Ryloth from the Empire because Empire. So that's essentially the bulk of this book. That is what Sidious and Vader are reacting to because although much of the galaxy just sees Syndulla and his resistance as just this, little movement, oh, they're not going to do anything, they actually start to take out major Imperial targets. They even successfully destroy an entire Star Destroyer, which is what draws Sidious and Palpatine to look at this matter themselves. So yeah, that's what draws them there.
Unusually. I do take issue with that.
Well, that's the
but we'll get
basic.
to that
There's
later.
the basic plot. So let's get into what we think of the book. And
Well, let's start with the writing style first, 'cause that's what we
yeah,
did
let's
last
start with the
time.
writing style.
I found it to be quite amateurish compared to what we've had so far.
I find it amateurish especially compared to what Paul S. Kemp has written before. Well, it's not bad. It's just very average. It's very average. The character, the way it's written, the way the structure flows, it's very, I don't know. It's just kind of there.
It's very clunky for me.
Very clunky.
It's functional, but not much more than that.
Yeah, it's like
It's
the most basic car you could drive.
Yeah, it's like Heir to the Jedi and Tarkin and even New Dawn. There was a lot of refinement in there. Even when you were dealing with the stuff in there that kind of made you go, "What?" It still felt like there. It still had a lot of focus to it. This book doesn't feel very
have much
focused.
focus.
It feels kind of clunky and mechanical, is what it feels like.
Mechanical is a good way of saying it. I actually like the writing style. I was actually having a tough time getting immersed in this book because of the writing style. The way it was written, it was just so clunky. It kept pulling me out of what was actually happening in the book, which, especially from Paul S. Kemp, really took me by surprise. I mean, obviously, no writer is perfect all the way through. Obviously, you can't always be consistent. But even for him, I was expecting more, and the style definitely took me out of it a lot. It keeps flip flopping like so sporadically. It's ridiculous.
The overall plot definitely lacked a through line to keep it together, and it wasn't enough of a character piece to sort of salvage that. But what I specifically meant when I said clunky, I was talking about the actual writing itself, not the general plot overview. I'll give you some reference. I've read, like I said, I've read this in like 4 hours, 3 hours ago, so I've got notes. There was a bit where he said, "Suffering was not the result of the rule of the strong over the weak. Order was." Immediately following a line where he talks about order for like an entire paragraph. The word order was used like 20 times in one scene, and it was just Vader's thoughts rattling around in his head. It's like, this is making Vader sound like he's just going, "Order!" in his own mind, which I didn't like. And also, very repetitive writing patterns in general. Like when it says, because Ryloth is not free. Because Ryloth is not free. Free Ryloth.
They never really go into depth on like what the Empire is actually doing to Ryloth, which I found perplexing as well.
The problem is what this book feels like is it feels like a script for a movie or a series of television episodes that someone basically just took and converted into a novel by adding prose. It doesn't feel like a true novel.
I agree. Like you were mentioning that it felt like a really good TCW episode, and it does feel like that.
If this storyline would have made for an excellent story arc in TCW or Rebels, but there just isn't enough here to support a book. It's just too repetitive. It's not really doing anything new. It's just people go places and do stuff. What
do you think, Antoine?
Okay, let me go back to the first point that Connor made. He said something about that the Lords of the Sith were just reacting when there's a specific line that completely negates that. All right, here we go. So this is when, that's freaking a spoiler, but there's maybe I'll talk about that later because it's a super spoiler.
Only give general responses now.
Yeah, that's why I'm going to say something generally. There's a point at the end of the book where everything is presented of why the proceedings of that day happened, and it was in complete contrast to a reaction. It was because it was of a construction, which I guess I get into spoilers. But yeah, that argument I thought was completely
they're going
off base and not. Go ahead, yeah.
They're going to Ryloth because they want to stop these rebels, because they know if they don't stop production of materials from Ryloth, and they don't want that to happen.
To be fair, that isn't the case. Anton's right. They have a reason for going. It's a stupid reason, in my opinion.
Yeah.
For the Emperor to give anyway, but it does have a reason.
Yeah, which I'll get into more specifically later because I can't read that right now. Yeah.
Save it.
And yeah, I actually disagree. I actually think this is beautifully written. Actually, I especially loved some of the battle sequences that we got and the way Paul X. Kemp highlighted all of those things. And I enjoyed the interplay he had with the dialogue. The dialogue between the rebels were especially great. These are actually my favorite rebels of the other stories we got with rebels in them, because pretty much every story we've got so far has had some sort of rebel cell of some sort, which I think is a cool play, because we get to see this through line of all these individual rebel cells doing their thing, but they haven't yet combined. And I thought this was such a compelling story for me from a storyline perspective, is because it shows what these rebels need to do to actually combat this empire, and to show that with all this effort that they're making within the story, to just put a dent, and not even a dent really, in the empire, really shows what they have to do to actually be a viable combatant in this Imperial war.
Well, that I'm not disagreeing with. I mean, the rebels are the most developed characters in the book. And maybe that should be a little segue into characters.
Yeah, we can talk about characters. Yeah, let's talk about characters.
Let's start off with Cham Syndulla.
Non-spoilers again, remember.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Cham.
Let's start off with Cham Syndulla. By far the most developed character in the book, by far the strongest, in my opinion.
I found him a little on the generic side, actually. Definitely developed. I don't want to disagree with that, but I mean,
I'm just meaning in comparison to everybody else.
Yeah, but in terms of interest, in terms of his level of interest, I didn't get I wasn't particularly attached to him compared to the others. I thought
he was a little. He was a little bit of a platitude spewer.
He was, but he acknowledges that about himself too.
Yeah, I will say that that's a point in his favor, but at the same time, it doesn't really change the fact that that's kind of what he does. It's like this is a guy who it's kind of like with Captain America. He's just so pure, so perfect that there's just nothing to him. This isn't a guy who has to struggle with, with the ramifications of whatever he's pursuing. He's already accepted everything and is now just dedicated to seeing things through. And because of that, it's like setbacks don't really hit him that hard psychologically. He just kind of it's like even if he kind of accepts the injury and keeps going.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. Technical glitch.
Yeah, sorry, it happened. So as I was saying before, Cham, he acknowledges his grief and he does take it in, but instead of breaking down, he just kind of just chokes it back. He just kind of suppresses it all. He just kind of holds it all in.
But there is a sequence towards the end of the book. I keep talking about end of the book stuff, but where it does take a toll on him. Yes, he does have that facade of, I'm this noble leader. I have to stand up for this movement. This movement is first before me. But towards the end, that takes a toll on him, and it's specifically addressed in the book, which I think we should acknowledge that it is addressed, that he does get broken down by it. So
it's not.
Oh, and
it's
that
not
sequence, when he does. Sorry. When he does break down, it is handled well. I'm not saying that's a negative towards him. I'm just saying that's how he's portrayed in the book until that point. It's kind of like, something happens to him, spoilers, that, just kind of breaks the, straw that breaks the camel's back. He finally, it just all weighs and just all comes.
And that's a natural character arc. That's how it works.
Yeah, I know, and I'm praising him for it. That's why he's the best developed character in the book.
But at the same time, he's kind of generic because that's a very conventional character arc. It's not like he's doing something unpredictable. He's just kind of a rock on the seashore, gradually being eroded away by the waves.
Yeah, it's really nothing we haven't seen before.
Which isn't so much a criticism.
An issue, yeah.
I was going to say
exactly. If it's told well, that's what matters.
Yeah. He's not a bad character or undeveloped or anything like that. It's just And he's not quite to the extreme of the early days of Captain America as well, as Connor said. He's kind of he's just that steady rock character that we've seen a lot of the time without a particularly unique flavor. So it's like he's not a bad character, he's just not an outstanding one. But he's also the most developed, which kind of glares it more as an issue than it actually is. Especially in a book that's titled,
we'll get to that when we get into flaws. Yeah. Okay, so should we move it to the other rebels?
Yeah, is Val next? Oh, sorry. Do you want to say anything, Connor?
I was thinking that we should probably just dedicate some time to talking about some of the stuff we liked in this book. And Antoine mentioned earlier the battle scenes. And while I got to say that the descriptions of the battle scenes were a little bit clunky, the picture they painted in my mind was really vivid and interesting. Like, I would have loved to see these battle scenes play out visually, even if the descriptions were a little bit meh.
I agree.
I completely agree with them. The space scene when they're over Ryloth with all those mines floating around the Star Destroyer, awesome.
Yes, I agree. Most of my issues with the writing overall, not counting the actual little errors at the in writing stits, is a through line between the scenes. The actual scenes themselves are very interesting for me. Like particularly the combat, as you say. That Star Destroyer scene when they actually well, I suppose a spoiler. Okay, never mind. The Star Destroyer scene, and all the other scenes that we'll get to later, I suppose. They have a certain level of personality to them, like because of the way they're told through the actual characters, as opposed to like, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. It was a case of, okay, we're following these characters doing this part of the mission, and these characters doing this part of the mission.
It's distinct.
Yeah, each had their own separate feel to it, which was quite good.
Yeah.
What did you like about them specifically, Antoine?
Again, the descriptions. Like I remember there's times where he was a particular thing that stood out to me was a time he was talking about an explosion, just a simple explosion. And he says how the explosion licked the stars, like it seemed like it was licking the stars. And I think that's something maybe Connor was referring to, how he paints this really good picture, which I felt he did very well. And there was a little bit of a poetry in the way he wrote, which I was weird why I thought you guys, or why you guys thought it was poorly written, when I thought he did a very good job with the artistry of it, which I feel like is more important to me in a narrative than being technically right, I guess, for me personally.
I probably came across as overly harsh when I criticized the writing. I didn't mean to say it was terrible. I just meant the flow of it was in many places a bit stilted. Like the way it would repeat points, and some of the times when it would delve into the dialogue of certain characters, it kind of went just jagged and sort of stopped the line.
It
feels very
like
rigid. It's very rigid.
It felt like he put more effort into some areas than others. It's like when he was on those things they really wanted to talk about, he put in a lot of effort. But on everything else, it was just like he's trying to hurry up and get to that next point that he really wants to write.
Yeah, and I felt that the points were a bit random as well. Like, if you look at if you went and looked, as we will later, went and looked about a step by step of the what actually happened, it's like this happens, and this happens, and this happens, and then this happens, with no real like logical progression. It makes sense in terms of the functionality of the story.
I really see what you're talking about, because I'm wondering what you're talking about.
Now, regarding what you said about making sense, that is one thing I will say in favor of this book. There's no dumb, convenient plotting in here. Like
I
didn't
mean to imply that. It doesn't. It does make sense, on a functional level. It's just as writing level. Why have we gone here? Why are we in this scene? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
I wasn't a big fan of that, but it's not particularly damaging to the books. It's just a flaw in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
so should we touch on
Ishval?
Yeah,
What?
Ishval.
Oh yeah, Ishval.
Yeah, that's where we left off. Not much to say about her for me. She was a bit angry.
Yeah,
a bitch.
She's just kind of she was just kind of a PTSD basket case, and that's all there really was to her. It's like the sort of person who's really good in a crisis situation because they basically feed off of violence. But when you put them in, an everyday life situation, it's like suddenly they lose the ability to function because, well, death's not around the corner. So yeah.
I mean, she's not quite on that edge where she cannot live a normal life, but she's right just off it.
She's very close to that point. It's like just 2 steps away.
Yeah.
I think she served as a direct juxtaposition to Vader because of, especially there's a point where they specifically note the similarities between them and their different paths, and their leaders, and how their leaders not breed them, how they raise them. Sidious being Vader's leader and Chan being her leader. I feel like that her specific character, or the reason why they even had her in there or wrote her in there, was a specific examination between her and Vader. That's why I felt her point in the story was for. Though I felt she was probably for me the most one-note character, in the book.
Yeah, she wasn't given too much depth. I mean, with her and Cham, it's like Cham's the positive influence, whereas Emperor is the negative manipulator.
Yeah.
of Vader is. It does kind of hammer that point in. The two parallels of the two partners, it works well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, she fills her role well. She's just not particularly interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing where it's like, it's kind of like, Christian Bale's Batman in the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy. The emphasis isn't really so much on his character as it is on what his character represents.
Yeah.
It's she's given a bit of flavour. Having said that, in a few scenes that we'll talk about later, but it's just not really enough compared to like Cham, who's just constantly there with her. He kind of eclipses her a bit.
Yeah.
What are the other characters? Should we do
Belcor,
Belcor before they Sith.
Moff Moors.
Oh my God! I did not like Belcor.
He wasn't
Why did you not
particularly
like him?
likable. I mean, he was good,
Yeah, I'm
but he
just
just
like,
wasn't
as a
likable.
character, I didn't like him either. Like I thought he was despicable as well.
I didn't like him either.
Yeah, I didn't
Yeah,
like him either.
Belcor is one of those Imperial officers that Starkiller would have been sent to kill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a nice person. But how well do you liked him as a character, written-wise?
I didn't mind him. Like, he was a very conventional and super ambitious Imperial officer who is more concerned with getting promoted than he is with actually being loyal to the Empire, and dedicates so much to undermining his superior, thinks he's being so smart, but then has it basically rubbed in his face that, no, buddy, you're just a fucking idiot. Shut up and let the big boys do their work.
I don't want to gravitate back to flaws again, but I think this is a relevant point to say it. The character seemed very inconsistent in that regard. You pointed out there how he went from being like this intelligent, clever, thinks he got everything under control kind of guy to
just devolves into a complete buffoon.
Yeah, and then
Well, I think
you've also got
natural progression.
it was more natural for him than the others, but he's just one of the lesser cases. You've got then Mors.
It's natural, but it's not good.
Yeah, we'll go into Mors in a second, but Mors does a complete turnaround as well. Cham does to an extent. Like in the very first scene you see him in, he doesn't seem anything remotely like the leader he is later. He seems a lot more amateurish at that point, and no great deal of time passes. Even someone like Vader doesn't change, I guess, but it's just the main non-Sith characters do seem to just sort of flip spin arounds, in my opinion.
That seems to be what their whole character arcs are. It's all these face heel turns. It's not like these are people who gradually come to grips with the things that are happening to them. It's them experiencing one big dramatic failure and them just basically having to bounce back from that, and that's all there is to it. There are arcs like that in that work. It's like, I'm not saying that sort of arc is a bad thing, but it kind of struck me as just being a little bit clumsily executed. It was all just playing off too fast. These characters they didn't really have very much room to breathe. Yeah. It was just kind of a race. It was a race for the finish line.
I almost see it as lazy personally. I mean, instead of actually taking time to develop these characters to an extent and actually get them to that point naturally, it's just like, they changed just because this one traumatic event happened all of a sudden, and then they changed. It kind of struck me as lazy.
This is a story that should have taken place over the course of a few weeks or even months. Its time frame should have been a lot longer.
Oh yeah.
I don't agree with that. I think that especially when you're in high distress, you can change very quickly. I feel like everyone's arc was fine except for one character. Like I felt Belcor's devolving into being this, feel like he's a confident, intelligent guy, being into like this psychopath who is talking to himself, towards the end. You know what I mean? But
yeah.
And then what were the other characters who had some turns? Cham, I thought he was fine too. Isfal, even though she really didn't have a turn, but some with her. I felt like Moff. I felt the Moff Moors had the most dramatic change that did not work for me because of where she came from and how she's this hedonistic character who's just is lazy. Is actually lazy.
Just someone who has no interest, someone who just has no interest in anything and is just coasting on neutral.
Yeah.
Right, because she's lost kind of the will to live because of a traumatic experience that happened in her life. I felt like her turn was too quick. I felt like she needed more time, but I feel like all the other characters, considering they're in this high stress scenario, had very authentic turns in this situation.
Yeah. When you mentioned her sort of backstory, we'll sort of like segue into more at this point. 'Cause we didn't mention it before. I felt that was the most, using Evan's comment of lazy. I don't think it was lazy for all of the instances, but that one particularly, I felt like as I read it, I was like, oh, okay, so this is the paragraph devoted to her developing her character. You know, it felt very much like he just went, oh, I haven't developed her. Throw that in. I mean, it's an interesting. It's a originally or more unique backstory, but it just seemed to come out. There was no like integration. It should have come earlier so that we knew her before this point, because you'd already known her for like half the book by then. If not
I
more.
agree specifically what you said about it being unique but not interesting.
Yeah,
We'll talk about that more specifically, but
Yeah.
I like how you said that specifically, how it's unique but not interesting.
Yeah. And like just approaching it in the broad strokes, I did like the stuff they did with the Vader Palpatine relationship, but at the same time, all they really did was establish it. They didn't take it anywhere. They didn't do anything new.
Yeah.
we didn't see anything new between them,
No.
which isn't necessarily a bad thing, granted. But
Yeah, there's just another thing I kind of want to point up. This book wants to be this book so badly.
I don't think so.
Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader.
it does try quite a bit. Like when it delves into it specifically tries to delve into Vader's head too often, and
it
in my
doesn't do it
opinion,
nearly as
doesn't-
well.
To me,
it
it
doesn't do it
even
nearly as
pull it
well
off
as
Yeah.
most
Dark
of the
Lord
time.
did. Not nearly as well.
Yeah.
For me, too much
I-
Anakin was visible in his suit.
Oh yeah, especially at this point.
Yeah, it's
This
too
is
far along for
seven. This is 7 years after Revenge of the Sith. Like this is the point where he's had a very good. He's been pretty successful at repressing that Anakin thing and turning into that engine of malice that is Darth Vader. Like just that cold, calculating machine that just moves ahead.
Yeah, it's really not fleshed out nearly as much. Like really, like I actually don't. I agree with like what you were saying before. I never felt like they added anything new to the Vader Palpatine relationship. Like all the interactions we've seen them go through in this book have been done before and been done better in other materials. And I never really felt like, oh, that'll make me look at Vader and Palpatine for different forever now. It just never really struck like that for me. I don't know about you guys. It just didn't for me.
It didn't for me, but I don't think it had to, so it didn't affect me that massively. It was kind of like a thing for me.
I'm totally on the same page as Evan here, and I disagree. I think it really should have. This book did call itself Lords of the Sith.
That's true.
So
That's true. I mean, from the title it should have done, but from the story, if it was named something else, I don't think it would damage the story.
If the story was named something else, I wouldn't have any problems here. It'd be just another, B-grade Star Wars novel. But because it called itself Lords of the Sith, I'm expecting, the spiritual successor to Darth Plagueis here, and instead I'm just presented with, Cham Syndulla and the Free Ryloth movement.
Yeah.
Antoine did raise a good point about how it's not necessarily just about them. The perception of them is perfectly valid. Is a perfectly valid exploration, but I do think even the cover kind of hinted against that.
Well, it's definitely misleading. They try to make it seem like it was this huge epic thing that was going to happen, which actually it kind of did, but not as intricate as you might think about it. But I did think the relationship between Vader and Palpatine landed, and I think it landed hard. I think it was really, really impactful for me of what their relationship meant and whose place was whose place. I feel like that was established extremely well.
I enjoyed the interplay between them. I just didn't like them so much. Well, Emperor was fine. Emperor's Emperor. But Vader, I didn't like the internal exploration of Vader himself. Like the partnership between them, I felt was relatively solid. It just wasn't anything fresh, particularly.
Vader was just way too emotional in this book. Vader kind of spent. It's like going by the Legends continuity. Vader spent most of his time in that armor, dedicating everything to just repressing his emotions, repressing his memories, and just trying to be this machine of the dark side. And it's like, this is 7 years after Revenge of the Sith. This is the point when he should be, really, really in his, like, really have his groove
Vaderized.
on. Like, yeah.
It should be Vader.
Where is it?
Not,
Where is it? Okay, never mind. I got it.
Though to its credit, it does the opening scene of the book. It really hammered in the whole Vader-esque nature of. That's terrible.
How Vader adapted.
Yeah, not so much how he adapted, but it nailed Vader in on the spot for the first page for me.
Mm-hmm.
The overall scene I didn't like because at the end it tapered into weirdness, but the first bit of it was perfectly encapsulated the way Vader should be, and then it kind of drifted away from that. After that, it kind of flickers between Anakin and Vader for the rest of the book.
Yeah, I actually really raised an eyebrow when it got to that one scene where like Palpatine's like, "What are you thinking of, Apprentice?" And like Vader's like, "I'm thinking of my past, Master." And it's like, really, like you're thinking of your past, and you spent most of your life trying to forget about it, and the Emperor's the last person who's gonna want to know that you still feel like Anakin. It's like, good move, Vader.
Well, also considering that where he was is what triggered it. That's the main reason of what triggered Anakin. It wasn't just like out
But
of the
nothing
blue.
should trigger Anakin at this point except Luke or Obi-Wan.
I agree.
But it's always there. No, but it's always there though.
Yeah, but
Yeah, it's
the
always
way
there, but only like what?
Sorry, it's not so much that it happened in at all. It's the fact that it happened at this point in time, and from this. I mean, he looks out at the planet of Ryloth and goes, "Oh look, Ryloth! I once came here." And then poof, suddenly it's like flood of memories that you
Anakin
just can't
memories.
possibly suppress. 7 years into
Yeah,
Vader.
Anakin, Ahsoka,
Yeah.
Mace.
Oh god, yeah. That line. We'll talk about it in the spoilers, but that line that kind of made me think of our little podcast.
Yeah.
That was
One
amusing.
one thing I will say is one little element I really did enjoy about a specific little element in the Vader Palpatine relationship is just the whole aspect of how Vader's approach to interacting with Palpatine is one of just pure blunt honesty. Like the whole idea that it's like, we know what the other guy is all about. We are beyond the need for lies.
Or at least
We'll
from
just
Vader's side.
from Vader's side. We'll just, it's like, I'm not going to lie to you because there's no point. So I'm just going to tell you what I'm thinking, tell you what's on my mind. And that element specifically was something I did really enjoy because it kind of painted a picture of the relationship between a Sith master and apprentice as being an incredibly intimate one, but it's the sort of intimacy you get where you're looming over someone as they die, watching the light go out of their eyes.
Yeah, they did a kind of weird spin. They took the general idea of the Master and Apprentice and kind of put the Palpatine approach to it in there. Like, he specifically trained Vader. I've written down the line somewhere. An apprentice owed his master loyalty, and a master owed his apprentice knowledge and must show only strength. Like, it kind of that owed loyalty thing has never been in it before. There's hints of like it's.
No.
Hang on, we're back. Sorry.
Oh shoot, sorry. Yeah, so going back to what Connor was saying, yes, I do think Vader was very forthcoming, but there was actually a specific part in the book where it says he was speaking in half truths. He wasn't speaking in full truths, and I actually feel like I agree that the relationship between Vader and Palpatine. I like that we see the Sith relationship because while in like a romantic book you get a lot of sexual tension, I felt like between Vader and Sidious you got a lot of violent tension, like underlining in all of their conversations where it could boil up to being a fight. It could be like, this is the moment where I'm going to challenge you. And I think they established that part of the Lords of the Sith and that relationship and that dynasty that goes on with that very well. Like, I felt like that was always undercut in all their conversations about this could be the moment where I'm going to try and challenge you. Could be the moment where we're going to try to end each other. And I felt that tension was always present in each conversation.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely got that tension to come across well, and I'm not saying ill of the book for that. In fact, like, those scenes when you see that tension are pulled off beautifully. Like, one of my favorite lines is when they're fighting, I'm just gonna call them bugs because that's pretty much what they were in that cave, and like, for an instant, Vader can't see Sidious because all he could see are like these bugs swarming him, and he thinks for a second, oh, what if he died? He's like, what was it like? For 1 second, the thought of ruling went through his head, but then it immediately vanished. And then he goes to save Sidious, and then Sidious even says to him, "You thought for a brief second what it would be like if I was dead, didn't you?" And then Vader just says, "Yes, I did." But then they just continue fighting. Yeah, I mean,
very good.
that is like brought off well. That element, of animosity and them challenging is pulled off well. The thing is, though, I didn't feel like they really did anything new with it. I just kind of felt like they were just kind of repeating the same patterns.
would you
Again,
have
going back
wanted
to Dark
there?
Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader, I just kind of felt like I was seeing those scenes just put in a slightly different light. I never, they didn't really add anything new to the animosity. In fact, in some regards, they might have even made it less violent because going back to Dark Lord, there's a scene in this book where Palpatine's all like, I could easily use my lightning to short circuit your life support system, and that generally terrifies Vader.
Okay,
You never got a sense of fear that, like, you got a sense of there's animosity between them, but you never really got the sense, at least for me, that there's one is scared of the other.
Here's the thing. I actually think that Paul S. Kemp actually wrote that much more eloquently than James Luceno, because in that novel, the way you describe it, Sidious overtly says, "I can kill you with this lightning." Versus in this book, there is a passage where Sidious simply places his hand on Vader and regards him as a friend, and that underlining subtext is, "I can fuck you up." Like that's the underlining
I
subtext,
understand that.
which is way more compelling if you're reading that, if you capture that subtext rather than overtly getting the words.
I understand that, Antoine, and I totally get that scene, but let me just place this one question to you. Does that make sense for Sith?
What? Sidious, yes. Someone like saying no.
Timothy is apprentice? Yeah.
But Sith aren't about overt intimidation. They're usually about all in your face, because especially for Sidious, he doesn't give a crap. He always says what he thinks all the time. This isn't anything new.
No, Sidious is covert. He's definitely not overt.
He's covert, but he's also overt when he wants to be.
Yeah, but against Vader, he doesn't want to be. He has to handle Vader. I mean, throughout his entire life, there's never a point where he can just stomp him in their relationship. He has to handle him and make sure that he's keeping the connection between Anakin and Palpatine alive, because he's still got that. It's a different, new take on the relationship now, but he's still the kind of whole mentor aspect is still there, just in a different light.
Right.
Interesting.
And I actually felt bad for Vader, because I felt like he no longer has his friends around, or any like legitimate mentors that can actually do anything good for him. He has this abusive father now as his mentor, and I think that really sucks. I felt bad for Vader a lot in this novel, actually, versus anything. And I guess things that are new, that for me that was new. Like, I never felt bad for Vader in that way.
See, I felt bad for Vader before, but this book didn't make me feel bad for him. I was like, this is just an unpleasant character, personally. Like, especially the way he's acting about other people in general. Okay, sorry about that. Just complaining about noise. The character we haven't spoken about yet is the Emperor. We've spoken about the relationship, but him himself, I really enjoyed how much fun he was having.
Yes.
He was having the time of his life.
He was having a blast. He was having a blast. I'd give it credit for that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was getting his hands dirty, and he loved the filth.
Yeah.
It's being able to cut loose is something he doesn't very often get to do.
No. Yeah. Where I think he enjoyed it the most when he was able to actually disrobe and get his hands dirty, because he doesn't get to do that. He's an emperor now. He has to rule. He doesn't fight anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Not that he ever really did, I suppose.
Yeah, he's never really been the
did
type.
before, but
Yeah.
But he likes doing it when he can.
Yeah, enjoy it. Take what you could get, right?
Okay.
So, Callan, where do you?
Yeah, I'll just fade out now.
Okay,
all right, so now where we going on?
Okay.
Callan had to kind of disappear for a few minutes, because the problem is that in the UK it's currently early morning, and him doing his podcast recording right now, he's kind of waking up his family, and they're getting a little pissy. So.
Yeah, so he's gonna be out for a little bit. He'll come back later, though. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay.
When his sister wakes up.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess we should talk more about Sidious, if there's anything else we haven't covered. I do agree with Callan. Him cutting loose, he was definitely having fun with it. It was definitely an interesting way to see him in that light, because he's right. We don't see Sidious like that too often, so that I very much enjoyed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is always nice to see Sidious in battle, because it's like he is that sort of sadistic lunatic who really enjoys fighting and killing things. It's probably one of the biggest regrets of his own personal life, that he's not really given the opportunity to do it more often, because, well, he's like a little kid pulling the wings off a fly.
That's actually a pretty good statement.
Yeah, I think that played into his initial fight with Mace too, like how giddy he was to finally remember that at the beginning he says you know how long I've been waiting. Yeah,
how long?
Steepling his fingers.
I've been waiting for this, with his looking at his blade. Yeah.
Like literally, he was so like he was in joy to have that battle. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I think was a detriment to him, because it opened himself fully to Mace. But
that's a debate for another day.
yes, it's the whole thing. But yeah, Sidious was awesome.
I will say this too. On the topic of fighting, they pretty much nailed Sidious's fighting style. as far as lightsaber combat goes. Very fast, very direct, integrated force abilities. They did that pretty well, like especially with his emphasis on speed. Yes.
Lot of spins and flips in there, and he just likes cutting things to pieces. So
Yeah. Although this is kind of a criticism as far as Darth Vader's fighting style goes in the book. I was a little iffy because they had him doing a lot of acrobatics too, and it seemed like it was.
Yeah.
I don't
know.
know. Many acrobatics from him. When he have a lot of acrobatics.
Well,
I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to recall.
They were fighting the bugs. It was talking about how him and Sidious were in sync, spinning around, ducking around, hitting those things. It was even when Sidious even tried to kill that Twi'lek girl. Like Vader was like, Sidious moved fast, but Vader moved faster.
Yeah, I mean Vader can move that fast. It wasn't like he flipped into position. He just
can, but it's not
flinged his saber out.
He can, but it's whenever he fought, they always put emphasis on speed, and it's like that's not what Vader.
They're pretty fast though.
Vader can be super fast when he needs to be, but at the end of the day, he's more of a slow and steady style fighter who's more about just, it's not so much about being able to blitz you with sheer speed. It's about making sure that his blade is where it needs to be at the right moment to achieve the desired effect. It's like he's the sort of person who's zeroing in on that one little chink in your armor and then slamming it with a sledgehammer. Mm-hmm. It's like he's not the sort of person who's coming on just like whoop 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 whoop.
Yeah. And that's something I didn't feel like they got across too well.
Yeah, like I said, it's all I don't remember too many acrobatics in the book.
It's also
a few. I feel like there's spurts. Like I think he does them in spurts.
Yeah, but literally all his fights, they put heavy emphasis on speed and jumping.
Jumping there might be an issue with that. I don't remember seeing, but speed is not an issue.
Yeah. It's like even in that stuff on the Star Destroyers towards the start where he was chasing after the saboteurs, it's like there were a lot of mentions of him running super fast. And it's like, Vader doesn't run. He uses solid power leaps to cover distance quickly, but his cybernetics are just too cumbersome to allow him to run.
Yeah.
Like, that's part of the reason for his slow and steady style, because he's
physically incapable.
Yeah, he can't go for big dynamic moves and acrobatics, so he's got to be conservative and direct and very minimalist. He's got to make every single motion count. He can't just, be like Yoda, just coming at you from everywhere. He's got to be very focused.
But I think he was. I think the way in which he was running in that sequence was on a direct line. It wasn't so much he was like hopping off the walls or anything like that, or like Grievous or something like that. He was going in a straight. Yeah, no, I'm saying running is fine. Like in a straight line, I think like Vader is very capable of doing a force run to get to a place he needs to get to. And then when he got to that place, when he got to that door, he like slammed his lightsaber like right into it directly. It's not like he was like starting to like, go crazy on it or something like that.
I'm just saying I just think they put too much emphasis on speed for Vader and not enough emphasis on strength.
Vader's the sort of person.
It's fine. He's a speed fencer. That makes perfect sense. But for Vader, it's like
Vader's the sort of person who kind of holds his lightsaber in a two-handed grip, waist height pointed to the side, and advances on you slowly, looking absolutely terrifying. He's not the sort of person who rushes you like a charging bull. He comes at you slowly, and it's just like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I know it's a minor nitpick, but it is a nitpick nonetheless.
It's a quibble, and I'm certain.
And it actually kind of makes me worried that, like, I hope they don't have that same sort of fighting in Rebels.
No, Rebels. If you look at the trailer, he's
well, I looked at the trailer, and it doesn't show that. But I'm just saying, I hope they don't take inspiration from this book and put it into Rebels and make Vader do some of that stuff.
Well, I think the thing I think you guys are taking issue with is that the specific situations he was in, like Connor, you've even mentioned this before too, that Vader uses his speed in spurts when he needs to, and each time in the book where he did it, it was needed. It wasn't like he was excessively using it.
I think it could also be just because all of the descriptions of him and Palpatine fighting alongside each other, the descriptions kind of got a little bit muddled because, Palpatine is all speed, whereas Vader is supposed to be all strength. Whereas the book didn't really talk too much about Vader's strength, but there was so much talk about Palpatine's speed that it muddied the water. it muddied the waters and it kind of painted the wrong picture in your head.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, Vader is supposed to be, immovable object, not unstoppable force.
Yeah.
So,
Mm.
yeah.
So
But,
that's yeah.
quibbles, quibbles, quibbles. Of course, this one quibble does kind of surprise me because Paul S. Kemp did Deceived, which was Darth Malkus's book, and I thought he did a great job of capturing Malkus's style there, which is kind of similar to Vader's. So I'm kind of surprised that it didn't really carry over, but
Yeah.
what can you do?
I
I
guess
might have to
so.
reread it because I don't remember this criticism of spinning and acrobatics happening for Vader. I do remember actual strength being highlighted.
Well, besides the point. Okay, so I'm just trying to think if there's
Right.
anything character related we should. Well, I do want to mention something I like. This one scene towards the end where Sidious and Vader are fighting, and then more Imperials come to aid him. I like how Sidious actually says, "You'll have to go with this one alone, my friend. I can't have this many people seeing me use the Force." And I really like how they highlighted how the majority of the galactic populace doesn't even know Sidious is a Sith Lord, and I like how they bring light to that by I can't use the Force with this many onlookers. I don't know. That's just it's a little detail, but it's one that caught my eye because it's they didn't need to put that in there, but the fact that they did, I liked that.
It's
Even his royal
keeping up with the
guards.
fact that,
What?
yeah,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
it's keeping up with the fact that he's trying to keep the fact that he's a Force wielder hidden because Vader's whole point with being a Force wielder is that he's kind of a symbol of the invincible might of the Galactic Empire. He should be showboating his powers and appearing unstoppable and godlike. But huge amount of Palpatine's platform as a ruler is rooted in anti-Jediism. And if he shows himself using Jedi-like powers, people are going to start questioning that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, even his royal guard, like they were shocked when they saw what he was doing. They were like, but they're like, sworn to secrecy, so like they're not going to say anything. But even like it was to the point where even when they saw that, they were like, well, we kind of knew something was up about you, but we didn't know you were like that. Like,
yeah. Oh shit, we completely forgot to mention the royal guard.
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
One of them was a
sergeant.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one of them was a clone trooper, which actually makes perfect sense to me because clone troopers were trained to have absolute loyalty to the Galactic Empire. So the idea of Palpatine actually drawing upon them for his royal guard makes perfect sense because he's got someone that he can rest assured will never betray him because he's been trained and indoctrinated, engineered for loyalty. So, dependable servant.
Yeah. He was just kind of your cutout, military guy who was loyal to Vader and Sidious to no end. Wasn't anything particularly interesting about him. He did have a couple cool fight scenes, but really the only thing that really stood out about him for me was the fact that he was a clone. Although I do like, you can see just how much more loyal to Palpatine he is than Vader because there's this point where, Sidious and Vader are arguing and he actually points his blaster at Vader instead of
Right.
Sidious, and that just kind of shows, just how his respect is kind of like. What are you looking at, Antoine?
I'm looking at the sequence that we were talking about earlier.
We can do this later. We could do this later, bro. Come on.
No, keep going because I'm continuing with. I'm listening to you guys.
We all got our copies of the book handy, so we can just review stuff as we're going. So,
by the way, did I mention that I actually have an extra copy of this? In the mail, when I got this book originally, the store I bought it from accidentally sent me 2 copies for the price of 1. So now I just have an extra copy of this book just laying around that I don't know what to do with. Connor suggested I just, sell it. What do you think, Antoine?
Or give it away. You can give it away to somebody.
Yeah. How would that work?
I say make a few bucks off of it, but
or make a few bucks off it. That's fine too.
Anywho, but yeah, stay on target. Stay on target.
Yeah.
Topic. Stay on topic.
Yeah. So Sergeant, anything else about Sergeant?
It's like, not really. It's like that's the thing about a lot of the characters in this book. It's like even the ones who are developed are still kind of generic. It's like they give you what you expect, but nothing more. Like Palpatine is Palpatine. Vader is not quite perfect. There's too much Anakin in there, but Vader is Vader. Belcor is, typical corrupt Imperial officer. Mors is typical lazy Imperial officer and Cham Syndulla is typical more righteous rebel leader. And, the Imperial Guards are Imperial Guards, loyal to a fault.
Yeah, they do try and mix them up a bit with certain attributes, but for the most part, they are pretty cardboard cutout. And yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to do okay. So we covered general story, positive opinions, characters. I guess we should move into flaws now. If there's nothing else anything anyone wants to add
Well,
before we get into spoilers.
it seems to me that most of the flaws were actually discussed in the positive opinions. It's like every single
Correct.
time we put forth a positive thing, we put forth a negative thing to counterbalance it. We kind of ended up mixing the two. So it's like a dedicated flaws section would make this appear like a wholly negative review. And I gotta say, I admit that this book isn't what I expected it to be, and I am a little disappointed. I don't want to say that it's a bad book. It's a perfectly serviceable book. It's just not excellent.
Yeah, it's not like there's nothing outright insulting about it. It's just slightly above average in my opinion. And I guess getting to that, I guess we should just go into the spoiler section now and talk about our critiques in a more descriptive verse.
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Okay.
so who wants to start us off?
Firstly, massive long rant I have, which
Go for
just
it.
kind of goes back to TCW, but it's something how this book is basically going to be the first in a long line of these.
Oh yes,
I
I remember.
Yes, I hate how this book basically represents the boring, whitewashed version of Ryloth that was put forward in TCW. Ryloth in the classic EU, before TCW did anything with it, was tidally locked to its sun, with the people living in massive Mines of Moria style underground complexes to avoid the constant heat storms that raged along the planet's day-night terminus, which, super interesting sci-fi style world, which would have been amazing to see visually, but TCW did away with that and just turned the planet into, well, it just looks like, Iraq. The entire planet is just Iraq. And then the Twi'lek culture itself, classic EU. We're talking a culture that has a long-standing ancestral association with the Hutts, and a culture that's based around slavery and the objectification of women, like women being bred specifically to be sex slaves. It's like, and it's like all of these super interesting stuff was basically just washed out by TCW because A, they wanted to make the place look like Iraq so they could put in their war on terror allegory, and B, they couldn't stand to let the negative aspects of Twi'lek culture stand because they needed these people to be victims that the audience could sympathize with, as opposed to having people questioning over whether or not they're actually deserving of rescue because their culture is so abhorrent. And because of that, Ryloth is now boring. And this is the version of Ryloth that all sources are going to have to reference back to going on from here. Like, to me, this story could have been so much more interesting if they actually went for the classical version of Ryloth. And, it would have been a nice way to elevate Cham Syndulla's character by making him just as even more righteous and perfect, by making it so he doesn't just want to free Ryloth from the Empire, he also wants to reform Twi'lek culture and get rid of all of these negative things that are in it. And it kind of took a really nuanced shades of gray thing and just whitewashed it and made it boring, and that's what we're stuck with working with from now on. And it's just like, it saddens me.
Yeah,
So
I couldn't agree more.
I'm done.
I couldn't agree more. They definitely took everything that made Ryloth unique and either changed it or just completely took it away, and it's a major detriment to the book's story because, like you said, the whole idea of maybe Cham Syndulla isn't just fighting to free Ryloth from the Empire, but to reform what the galaxy sees Ryloth as. That would have been very interesting, and that would have added more credence to his character and to his movement. But just up and taking it all away, it just feels I don't know. It just cheapens everything, really.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah.
not really a detriment to the book as much as it's the original canon set by the original show. So I wouldn't give that criticism to the book, in the
Oh
way that
yeah,
you're doing it.
I know. Let me just amend myself a bit. I don't want to criticize the book for this because this is another one of those cases where the book is having to work with what it's got. It's and
You're just
yeah, and
disappointed with what could have been.
yeah, it's something that could have been a lot more interesting if that whole aspect of Ryloth and the Twi'lek culture had not been retconned. This book could have been so much more amazing. But instead, this book is in part brought down by the consequences of what TCW did.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Antoine?
it's
I have no opinions on that whatsoever.
Seriously?
But Ryloth was fine with me. That never occurred to me, so I have no kind of opinion to formulate about that.
well, you weren't exactly familiar with what Ryloth was like before it was depicted in TCW. It's like if you go pick up a copy of do you have Quinlan Voss Jedi in Darkness?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well just reread Twilight. It's like the Ryloth depicted at the start of the book in that story is kind of what Ryloth is supposed to be like. Much, much more interesting than it became, but nothing that can really be done for that. So,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Just kind of lamenting what could have been.
yeah, it's like the character, like that sort of element to Twi'lek culture could have even made the character of Eastfall that much more interesting. Like, instead of just being a former prostitute, she's a former slave.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, I think she is supposed to be a former slave, is what the canon is supposed to be. Part of her thing being is that she's a prostitute as well, but
Yeah,
But I don't think they ever mentioned slave, did they? They mentioned prostitute,
Yeah.
but not slave.
It's like
they
the
insinuated
whole-
prostitute, but they didn't say specifically prostitute.
Well,
Nah.
that element seemed more prominent than the element of slavery, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's
Well,
like
I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand. They were like sex slaves, basically.
Yeah, but still, it's not. It's the sort of thing that you get with a pimp and his girls in the red light district of any city. It doesn't feel like this is an institutionalized aspect of Twi'lek culture where all women are just bred to be sex slaves. It's like, one of my favorite little moments in the Star Wars Republic comics is when Aayla Secura is going undercover as the daughter of some wealthy Twi'lek clan leader, and when she's given the chance to drop her cover and stop and just be herself for a second, she basically just has a quick little temper tantrum there because she's so pissed off about how easily she slipped into that role, because she was bred to slip into that role. She was bred to be frivolous. She was bred to be a plaything, not a person. And the fact that going back to that is so easy for her was just something that just really made her shudder deep down inside. And because they basically retconned that aspect out of Twi'lek culture, they took that super interesting thing away from not just her, but so many other characters. It's like Eastfall, it's like her history as a former prostitute is the sort of history that you get from any person who was born in poverty. It's not like she was the product of a culture that institutionalized this. She's just the product of the seedier element of her culture that's found in every culture. It's like the seedy aspects of Ryloth shown here, that red light district, that plaza she goes to. It's like there are places like that in every city here on Earth. 118th here in Edmonton. Yeah, it's just kind of going back to the whole rant I was giving and how this book is brought down by those consequences. It's me. This is just me lamenting what could have been. So I think we'd just better stop and move on to what this book itself actually got wrong.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So actually, moving on, I wanted to move on to what the whole overall book was about, because I wanted to in the beginning.
Yeah.
There's a sequence where Sidious basically lays the law down to Isfal. He says, "Oh, my life was never in danger, dear girl. But since you are unable to understand what actually happened here, I will tell you. Everything that happened today happened only because I allowed it to. True, your sorry little movement struck its blow, but it did so too soon, before the time was ripe and before it was mature enough to pose a serious threat." And that's exactly what the mission was for. He wanted them to expend all their energy. He wanted them to expend all their resources on something as menial as his assassination attempt, which he knew was going to fail from the very get go. And it's just, Sidious doing business. Like that's what you got to do. You got to snuff these out quickly. Like when there were slave revolts, back in the day, you had to snuff it out quickly. You couldn't just wait. You had a comment.
Well, I kind of get what you're going for, but it just seems to me that what they did with how, like, the whole using that justification for all of Sidious's actions in the story seems kind of flimsy, because there didn't seem to be a single moment where he wasn't in danger. It's like he could have been killed when his shuttle crashed on Ryloth. He and Vader were almost overwhelmed by that horde of lilac insects. It's like, it just feels like this whole thing was kind of a pointless and over-the-top gambit to achieve something that could have been done just by sending Orn Free Taa to Ryloth on his own and just make sure that there's a backup Star Destroyer full of a whole bunch of super highly trained commandos.
Yeah, just stomp them. Why sacrifice the Star Destroyer if you could just stomp them outright?
Because that's not going to work. They needed to know that Vader and Sidious were coming for them to extinguish all of their resources. You have to understand that. Also, you were saying something before that. After that about the. No, not you. I'm Connor. What were you saying after that point about the? You had a point about something, but I completely missed what it was. The second point you had.
Oh, well, it just seems to me that there wasn't a single point in this whole thing where Vader and Sidious weren't in danger. It's like, it just seemed, like Palpatine just hand-waving it all away, saying, oh, I was never in any real danger, just doesn't hold water, because as much as he enjoys getting his hands dirty, as much as he enjoys violence, there's no questioning the fact that he was in danger.
Actually, there wasn't, because if you actually look at when they were escaping,
like saw those bugs coming.
If you that part where it was something that he didn't foresee, but in terms of the attack itself, where was he when Vader found him? In his shuttle, like a secondary shuttle that he knew what he would need because he had this perception to do that. When they landed, it was also, you got to remember, it's a test for Vader. It's not just a test for the rebellion and snuffing them out. It was also a test to, which you guys disagree with because you guys don't like him having his Anakin-isms in there, but I thought was fine. It was a test to snuff out all of Anakin. And yeah, I thought that worked out fine. And the only time they were in any real danger, I think, was with the Lilacs, and I think that was fine the way they dealt with that, because they showed how extensive, how a huge horde that upsets these Twi'leks that are on the planet, how easily they can decimate them. And they weren't even almost to death. They killed them pretty easily.
Yeah.
Well,
that's another thing. That is kind of another thing that's in the book's detriment. You never feel like Sidious and Vader are in any real danger. You really don't, because you know that Twi'leks aren't a threat to them. You know the bugs aren't a threat to them. And it's kind of, I don't know, it kind of cheapens the whole theme of, the hunt that this book tries to get by. Vader and Sidious on the run from the rebellion. It really, you never get that sense that they're in any real danger. I don't think, this entire book, neither Sidious or Vader ever got hurt, even close to getting hurt.
Yeah, and it's well, it's like, I say danger in a technical sense. Technically speaking, yes, they are in danger, even though their powers are enough to make sure that they're not. And it just seems to me that the whole thing where they're fighting the bugs itself is just a little pointless, because it just felt like a pointless diversion that didn't really go anywhere. They just wanted a situation where Vader and Palpatine could cut loose and plow through a whole bunch of enemies. And I'm just like, well, why couldn't they have just created such a situation by having them, say, attack one of Cham Syndulla's bases and, turn it into a sequence from the Force Unleashed novelization where they're just pulling out mechs and battle droids and throwing them at them? That would have been interesting, and it still would have served the plot, because they're not just killing things for no particular reason. They're actually working towards their goal.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. I actually think that sequence gave me a lot of fatigue, because there's only so many ways you can kill Lilacs, and I think they killed them in every single way you possibly can. Ripping them apart, slicing them through, lightning, every single thing you possibly could have done to those things, they did, and they spent a whole chapter on that. I thought it was a little bit much. I was like, oh yeah, everything you're doing is awesome, but that's a little bit too much. You can cut back on that a little bit. I don't need so much, of all that. But
especially considering how powerful Palpatine is, he should have just been able to fry all of those bugs instantly with Force lightning. Just
Which
create one of those scenes from the old Republic MMO where it's like all of the Jedi Masters confront Vitiate, and he's just like, "You stand there because I allow it, because I do not fear." Calls down a storm of lightning, kills them all instantly.
which Vader insinuates that Sidious could have done all along. And at the end of the book, he specifically says Sidious was holding back. He thought at one point that Sidious was holding himself back so that he can bring out Vader to attack him, because he wanted Vader to attack him. He didn't want him to go back to the light side or have these feelings with Anakin and all that kind of stuff. So he did that specifically to, hey, trying to attack me so we can have this fight, so I can show you like what's what. He did that specifically. I think he easily could have done that if he wanted to. He could have easily just decimated all those Lilacs if he wanted to. But no, he specifically held himself back to bring that out of Vader because he wanted that. But yeah, I'm actually completely fine with them not being in danger, because I don't think that was the point of it for me, at least. I felt like the point of it was to show how dire the situation was going to be for these rebels going forward, and their struggle to fight this empire and these lords of the Sith. For me, that's what it came across as. Hello, are you actually back now?
Hello, hopefully. Provided she doesn't complain again. It's 6:30, so she's got no reason to. Sorry. You saying he could have easily basically sums up the book for me. He could have easily. I mean, why didn't he just alert the Intelligence Bureau to the workings of the rebels and have them...
Like I said before, they had to know that Vader and Sidious were coming for them to extinguish all their resources.
Could get that across without having to go personally?
No, they had to go there because
their
intelligence...
and then stomp them without sacrificing the Star Destroyer?
Well, how do you mean stop them? Like, what were they...
Well, he knew the attack was coming, so he could have stopped it.
There's also the Vader test. You're forgetting the test. It's the test for Vader, and it's the extinguish the rebellion.
He couldn't find any other way to test Vader.
Yeah, like that's the other thing.
Should Palpatine still really be testing Vader at this stage, like this severely?
The fact that the book takes place so long after Revenge of the Sith, like all of Vader's inner psychological issues should be, they should be dealt with already. Like, this is stuff that would have been dealt with within the first couple years of the reign of the Galactic Empire. It wouldn't be enduring this long. Especially not with that first chapter at the start that has Vader saying the word order like 20 times in his head. It's like the first chapter really establishes Vader's personality, but then it feels like the rest of the book goes out of its way to try and undermine that, because it just feels the need to constantly kind of foreshadow Vader's eventual redemption. Whereas for me, it's like it feels too soon. Like the return of Vader's humanity should be brought on by the influence of Luke Skywalker and Luke Skywalker alone.
And Ahsoka Tano, to an extent.
And Ahsoka Tano to an extent.
We'll see how that plays out.
It shouldn't be something that he's constantly struggling with. It should be something that he is effectively repressed and pushed out of his mind. And it takes the presence of the son he thought was dead to bring that out of him. So it's like this test shouldn't even be taking place, because this is the point where Vader should be completely into getting things completely into swing as a Sith Lord. He should be completely comfortable with who and what he is and where he is. And it's like the first chapter kind of establishes him as being comfortable, but then the rest of the book undermines that.
Well, let's reevaluate that, because that first sequence to me is actually a facade of what he wants to be, what he thinks he needs to be, because he's being taught to be the Sith Lord to get his power from his hate and his aggression.
But that's the thing.
But that's going to dissolve.
That's the thing. He's not being taught, though. He is a Sith Lord. That's why this book's called the Sith. Lords of the Sith. Yeah, it's that he's not the apprentice anymore, or he's not just an apprentice anyway.
He's learning it himself.
Yeah, but he's still being taught like a Padawan would be.
Like Antoine, at this point in Vader's life, there is no struggle. He is Vader,
supposedly. But also, all of the previous EU stuff hasn't been established, so they've got to operate as though that hasn't happened.
Correct.
Which means this should have been done not 7 years later, basically.
Yeah, the storyline of this book would have actually worked a lot better too if worked on a longer time frame of, say, a few days or weeks instead of just 1 or 2 days, and maybe have it so it takes place only a few months after Revenge of the Sith, when Vader actually would still be struggling. And of course have it so dealing with Cham Syndulla, it's like dealing with the immediate aftermath, Cham Syndulla's actions in the immediate aftermath of the Clone Wars. Taking him down that early on, because taking him down that early on would have actually made Palpatine look even smarter, because Cham Syndulla he's a revolutionary who allied himself with the Republic during the Clone Wars, meaning that Palpatine, as the leader of the former Republic, would have been aware of him and would have known to watch out for him. So why would he sit around for 7 years and do nothing about a known revolutionary operating in a known hotspot?
And why with Palpatine knowing about it would he not just stomp it out instead of sacrificing the entire Star Destroyer and causing a whole political scene that's going to make the Empire look bad?
Well, they cover it up, though.
Even if they just cover it up, they're gonna have to say like a malfunction happened or something. You know, this was the first Star Destroyer that went down, and he let it happen.
Yeah,
I mean, granted, he shouldn't care about the people. He's not like, oh, they're just people. Who cares if they die? But he should care about subtlety and the image, and you know, it's going to be more problems for him down the line for no real reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like, it just feels like if this is supposed to be some elaborate scheme laid out by Palpatine, a Batman gambit to goad his enemies into moving against him too soon, then it was really sloppy.
Because they moved. Why didn't he just have like 3 Star Destroyers jump in like as they moved? And now he's dead.
Wait, as they move, what are you talking about?
Well, when they jumped the Star Destroyer, which he knew in exact details how it was going to happen, why didn't he just let it happen and then call in the cavalry? Like, why wasn't that pre-planned? Why didn't they just stomp it out?
Well, they had mines behind them too, because they had the mines set up so that when they had their hyperspace jump, they had mines placed behind them and in front of them.
Yeah, which he saw coming. So why didn't he just pull the ship on full stop and have like a fleet jump in, proving to his men that he's all-seeing and knowledgeable, and the Imperial Security Bureau does its job.
Because it wasn't for his men.
And the Empire is unbeatable. It
wasn't for his men.
It was for Vader. But he could have done that anyway. Why didn't he just go on a retreat with Vader and have him slaughter some kids?
And the thing is,
which is essentially the ultimatum of the book. Like, here,
pretty much the ultimatum is like, go kill the Twi'leks.
If he let the Star Destroyer be attacked, but then brought in a fleet of Star Destroyers immediately afterwards, what do you think Cham Syndulla would have done? He would have crapped his pants, because he would have realized that he's facing an enemy who can effectively anticipate his every move. It's like, even if his movement wasn't destroyed, would he have done anything at all after that point? Or would he have been cowed into submission?
Even better would be he then goes off and stays a rebel leader, which Palpatine likes, because then he's issuing caution at every turn to every single person. Like, you don't understand, these guys are like insanely good at their jobs. He'd be roadblocking the entire rebel progress.
Fear.
Yeah, feeding the fear. So that would have made way more sense on Palpatine's.
And that also just kind of goes back to one thing I've come to seriously resent: the whole insinuation that stormtroopers are incompetent, bad soldiers that everyone is latched onto, that they have latched onto in fucking Rebels. Like, they got that bit where it's like Rex says, "Oh, stormtroopers, whatever," and it's like, no, the Empire wouldn't have been able to hold on to power for as long as it did if they didn't have a top-notch military, because they were a military dictatorship.
To be fair, in this, though, that wasn't the case. The stormtroopers came across as pretty competent for me.
True, but we're just broad strokes overall.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
that's one thing that did well, though.
Yeah. The only time it doesn't really make sense is, of course, Return of the Jedi, when Ewoks basically beat stormtroopers. But like all the other times we've seen stormtroopers, it makes sense for them to be kind of incompetent, because the ones on the Death Stars probably weren't the 501st that were on the Death Star, but like the ones who came on down to Tatooine and were like chasing down the Death Star plans, they were pretty competent. If you remember the Jawas that they were like in, how Obi-Wan's like, precision.
I will concede that point, and that's one thing. With the exception of Return of the Jedi, it's like the stormtroopers are never portrayed as outright incompetent, and even if they are, there's usually an explanation. Like the Death Star stormtroopers are getting what is the infantry equivalent of a cushy desk job, where they probably never even saw combat. Mm-hmm. Whereas, the stormtroopers on Tatooine are, these are the guys who boots on the ground doing their jobs.
Seasoned.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whereas,
sorry.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's just the overall notion of stormtroopers being incompetent, and I just wanted to comment on that. It's something I see as ridiculous and kind of insulting, because to me, the most effective villains are the ones who not only know what they're doing, but actually win most of their engagements. Like, that's one area where TCW screwed up hard. Grievous never won. Therefore, Grievous was never a threat. Dooku never won. And sure, his cruelty made him pretty terrifying, but end of the day, you never had any real doubt over whether or not he would be defeated.
And in this, while Vader wins every battle, obviously, and that was done quite well, the overall objective, he Palpatine could have won in a million better ways, different better ways.
Yeah.
Like,
It's like
the end result is Rebel Cell brought back to basics. There's just Cham left, moving on to the bigger things, and Vader re-established for what he should have already been. That was the end of the book. That was a sum total of everything that happened, and that just seemed like a really roundabout way and a logical way for Palpatine to let it happen.
Oh yeah, and one other thing. Now there's a competent political officer in charge of Ryloth because Moff Moores gets that kick in the pants she needs to get her act together.
Yeah,
but,
which again happened really weirdly.
Yeah, but it's
I can talk about that more specifically now.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, so so the big thing about her is that she's like the first gay character in Star Wars, which I thought was kind of a gimmick.
Is she the first, really? Has it never happened before?
Not officially. Not officially.
In the Legends continuity, there are like 3 gay Star Wars characters. I could list them off for you, but I'll leave them be. But yeah, it's just the fact that I didn't mind how it was handled in the book because they didn't make a big deal about it. They just kind of mentioned, "Oh, you had a wife. Okay, whatever." It's just the fact that it's the fact that a lot of the promotion for the novel made a big deal about it.
Correct.
With Paul S. Kemp constantly being asked questions about, okay, so you've just written the first official lesbian character in a Star Wars work. How do you feel? And it's like,
it's just one line.
It's barely even touched on.
It shouldn't be touched on.
Exactly.
Really not a big deal.
Yeah, there's just not much to her character. So
yeah, but beyond that, like her turn, like I said, like her turn I felt was the most sharp, and it was just like, oh snap, I'm gonna be in a lot of trouble. So I should have got rid of Belcor the whole time, and then she's like, oh, I'm gonna get over this because basically she's in grief because her wife had died, I believe, in a Coruscant accident. She died in Coruscant, I think.
Crashed against the wall.
Yeah, she crashed or something. Yeah. So she went into grief and became like a player. Like she had a bunch of Twi'lek slaves and like sex slaves, whatever. Yeah. Greenskin, yes, very very.
They pointed that out.
Yeah, they did. And then I think she just turned on a dime really quickly. Like I felt like. I don't know. That's the one I felt should have had more time to develop.
And it's not just her kind of way of viewing things. It's not like her actions. She's like becomes like this genius. She's like, okay,
right.
In like a scene that would have taken about 2 minutes max. She deduces that the person that betrayed her was Belcor.
Belcor.
It is Belcor.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the other one because the other one's got a similar name. He just jumps to that conclusion. It's like, okay, this means this, this means this, this means this, this means this, and like that is not the character you are introduced to at the start.
It's like it's almost like she kind of starts out the whole story as just this drug-addled, person just coasting on neutral, and then suddenly something happens and they turn into Sherlock Holmes, and it's like,
it's like, okay.
Very sudden, very sudden.
I mean, if it had been subtly foreshadowed, like you see hints of intelligence, or she was just putting up a guise earlier, or whatever, anything like that, then great. She could have been someone who stays behind scenes and just like a spy master, pretending to be incompetent while she runs everything through other people.
Not right now.
What? What is it?
What happened?
Are you about to disconnect?
Oh no.
I believe he's about to disconnect.
Oh yeah, he's froze. There he goes.
There we go. One moment, people. Sorry about that. Antoine disconnected.
Okay, so Connor, you want to go over what you just rehearsed for the final major criticism?
Okay. The big problem with this book is the misleading title. If a book calls itself Lords of the Sith, it's kind of implying that it's going to be all about the Lords of the Sith, but it doesn't really have much to do with the Lords of the Sith. And I don't quite agree with Antoine's idea that it's based around everyone's reactions to the Lords of the Sith, because it's not like they spend every minute of every day talking about the Lords of the Sith. It's just like, we're chasing after the Emperor and Darth Vader. And it's like, I kind of went into this book expecting, the spiritual successor to Darth Plagueis or Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader. And instead, I kind of got, Cham Syndulla and the Free Ryloth movement.
Yeah, really, if you count all the pages Vader and Sidious are actually in the book and then compare it to the actual number of pages in the book, it's surprisingly small.
And every time they talk about attacking the Emperor and Darth Vader, as they keep saying, it's laughable. Because like, oh god, yeah, you don't have a chance. So every time they plan, while it's interesting the way they plan and go over everything and talk about it. I find the scenes interesting, but they're just kind of underridden by the fact that we can't root for them because we know they have no chance. I mean, that's not even counting the fact that we know that Vader and Palpatine lived through it. Obviously, just for their power alone, it's just nothing they do is going to win.
Yeah, and I feel the opposite about that. 'Cause I feel like that the fact that they have no chance is showing the dire situation that these rebels have, you know, and that they have to combine their efforts to have any kind of dent in the Empire at all.
But that doesn't make for a very good story structure, Antoine.
It does for me. You're talking about personal opinions here. You can't say that doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
True.
Sorry,
it's
sorry.
the fact
My apologies.
It's also the fact that, you know, it's like Palpatine's comment at the end of the story about how he basically let all of this happen they're trying to hand wave away the fact that the Sith Lords spend most of the story reacting to the actions of others when they should be driving the plot themselves, with everyone else reacting to them. Cham Syndulla getting a message, oh, my recon team that I sent to find their location has just turned up dead? Oh, shit.
But that's what happens, though, that everyone is reacting to what they're doing.
Not really.
No, they're reacting to their actions, and then the reactions happen to them. It's not like they're the driving force. I mean, at the end, Palpatine sits back and, yes, I saw it all happening precisely as planned. But it's like, why didn't you do anything about it then? If you knew that was coming, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this?
There's an explanation, but you just don't like the explanation, that's all.
What's the explanation?
It's
Vader's test, but you just don't like it.
But it's not. He doesn't let that happen because of the test. That's just the whole scenario that he feeds into the test. I mean, yes, he says that's part of the reason, but he could have fed that into any situation. I mean, there are a lot of rebel cells out there, a lot of children.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, so you're saying that it's not there and it is there. You just don't like the explanation.
No, his reason's there, but it's a stupid reason, and it's not something that fits Palpatine or Vader at this point in time.
It's a bad explanation. It's a pointlessly risky Batman gambit based around him hoping that these rebels will behave in the way he expects them to, but if they did anything else, if they did something unpredictable, his entire scheme would have fallen apart because it was all based around assumptions.
To be fair, I don't have a problem with that because that's just Palpatine's.
Yeah, that's not assumptions. He doesn't assume.
Sorry, side note before we move on. Is anyone else find it really irritating that Vader kept going like, "How did he know that? How did he know that?" It's like, are you kidding me? He's using the Force. Which you know. So why are you suddenly finding Force sense like beyond your imagination? Like you've been doing it for years. Anyway, moving on. It's the fact that he knew what was going to happen in precise detail and didn't plan around it. He just let it happen.
Yeah.
And then at the end said, "Haha, I knew all along."
They try and pin. Sorry.
He approached the situation the way Qui-Gon Jinn would have, not the way Palpatine would have. Palpatine's the sort of guy who's all about demonstrating his superiority. He's all about the Xanatos gambit, where every single possible outcome results in turning situations into win-wins. Every possible outcome serves him. But the way he proceeded through this story was more like just improvisational, fly by the seat of his pants, let's see how this turns out, because woohoo.
Yeah,
I visions when he was on the bridge, just kind of lying on a couch, like Greek Emperor style, and just like, oh, this is fun. He's like, oh, look at that. So it was. I mean, I enjoyed how much fun he was having because obviously he doesn't care about the situation; it's just nothing to him. But I just wish he could have done that with the whole plan in mind behind that.
Yeah,
as opposed to just letting things happen for the sake of it.
It's like this story wouldn't have been nearly so bad if it was, say, a TCW episode or an episode of Rebels, because their TCW and Rebels pay lip service to high-minded ideas, but their actual stories are very simplistic and straightforward. So if this were just a story arc in either of those shows, it would have fit in perfectly, and we would be seeing it as a good story by the standards of what those shows crank out. But as a Star Wars novel, especially a Star Wars novel written by Paul S. Kemp, who has done better, it's subpar.
It is underwhelming.
It's very, very average. Well, maybe slightly above average, but it's really just kind of there for me.
Same.
Yeah.
Ben's the most positive about this, so what are your...
Sure, well...
I'm going to go with my conclusion. I'm going to wait till we all conclude, then I'm going to conclude it.
Like with your rating, or like concluding with opinions, or both?
Okay.
Both. But we've been really all over the place with this one. Like, not quite structured to Enter the Jedi. So have we missed anything? Like, big, well, we obviously have, but like the big stuff we want to mention. I'm looking through my quasi notes.
The ending with the kids and the Vader going to.
Yeah, that was
yes,
okay, so we're doing this again.
Vader goes into a cave where a bunch of Twi'lek villagers are hiding out to escape a battle, and draws his lightsaber and does his Vader thing where he just kills them all. And it's like, haven't we seen this before? It just feels like, it kind of feels like what Palpatine is doing in this book is he is just kind of putting Vader through the exact same manipulations that he used in Revenge of the Sith. It feels like he's doing the exact same stuff over again to achieve the exact same thing, something he should have already achieved. It's like, I know that this is part of the new canon and they're not enslaved to what was established in Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader, but the way things were presented in Rise of Darth Vader made a lot more sense, especially because Rise of Darth Vader took place so soon after Revenge of the Sith, whereas this book takes place so long after Revenge of the Sith. These are not issues that Vader should be dealing with.
Stuff like the Purge comic as well, when he was all like, "Oh, Obi-Wan, I'm angry," and chasing after the people to Kessel. It's like that's the kind of Vader we see in the opening here, with the whole angry, rage-fueled power, and then it just drives through with a whole Anakin tint to it for the rest of the time. I mean, you get bits of actual Vader, like I particularly enjoyed the extremely cheesy but funny Dun Mok sort of tactic in the opening bit where he boards the ship. Classic Anakin, just jumping from a ship into another one. When he's going, "I'm coming for you now."
Yeah, with the radio.
Yeah, it's like cheesy as all hell. It's like, okay, that makes sense. Vader would do that.
That's one thing I did enjoy because it was kind of horror movie-esque and it kind of told you just what. It's like, I wish that this book had more stuff like that, more stuff with Vader and Palpatine acting against the rebels directly and doing more stuff like that, more horror movie things like that, where it's just like guys are just listening over the radios and they hear the hum of lightsabers and screams of agony,
Yeah, that was really
and then and then
Hardcore.
the sound of the little microphone being disturbed, and then respirators.
Yeah, I particularly like the fact that it noted he stopped and deliberately let the before saying, "I'm coming for you." It's like, yes, that's the way
it's like
Vader
he
thinks.
knows like the power, like he knows how intimidating he really is, and he uses that to effect.
Yeah, as a Sith Lord should.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's like,
But then after that, it kind of just sort of goes downhill.
Yeah, it's like the book starts out fine. It's like the initial stuff with Vader was pretty good. The initial scene between Vader and Palpatine was actually really good. It's like, what your thoughts are troubled, my apprentice, not troubled, master. You're pondering the nature of strength. Yeah.
But, yeah, that was another thing. They kind of went on and on about the nature of the Sith dark side. Like, yeah, you're just saying the rule of two in different words. Like, why are you going over this and thinking of like being proud of it? Vader's pseudo-philosophical rants in his head just irritated me for this book.
Yeah, it's also like, Paul S. Kemp is pointed out as being a former lawyer, and that's part of the reason why he's so good at writing villains, and that's something that really carried over when he did Deceived, because Darth Malgus was a guy who kind of had that same sort of self-righteous martial philosophy streak that Vader has, but he pulled it off so much more successfully with Darth Malgus than he did with Vader. With Vader, it was just repeating a lot of the same concepts again and again and again. With Darth Malgus, it was him applying these concepts to his everyday life. It's like these concepts aren't just things that he's saying in his head. These are things that he internalizes and acts on.
Now he meditated to sharpen the edges of his anger. There's a great line of the book that illustrates just what Vader does.
Yeah, and that's really like another criticism. Like, you get these little glimpses of just these great ideas or these like great sequences, like the one you just said, Callan. It really drags the book down for me that it just all devolves into mediocrity after that. But you still get these like little glimpses here and there. It's like, I want more of this. I want to see these ideas explored. It's a real bummer.
Sorry, I lagged out a bit then at the end.
I did, or you?
You
wait.
did.
I'm just saying it's a real bummer to see like these ideas, these really brilliant ideas, just mentioned and explored slightly, but you never see them again after that. The book just devolves into mediocrity, and that's really That's really a shame.
Well,
At least to me.
Yeah, I agree. It's
Yeah.
like on one hand you've got like that line, now he meditated to sharpen the edges of his anger, and on the other hand you've got, I called her Snips sometimes. Like, what the hell? Vader does not even say the words. He does not think the word Snips.
Yeah,
that is
no.
gone. Ahsoka maybe, but not when you. Okay, oh look, that's right off. I came here once, back when I had Ahsoka. Ahsoka, Plo. I mean, he thinks of Plo Koon in this book.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
really
Why is
random.
Plo Koon in this book? Like even in the mentioning, it's like.
And Anakin never had a very strong connection to Plo Koon. He didn't care about Plo Koon. So why the fuck would Vader be thinking about Plo Koon?
It's just,
Yeah. Just all for its own
off
sake.
names. It's like, why are you thinking about this guy? You've just crashed. Why are you caring right now? It's like if he'd seen Ahsoka and then was going over all these flashbacks, I could get it. If it was in Rebels or something, but here it's just there's nothing to trigger this. It just happens randomly. 7 years after the fact. It seems a
Yeah.
bit
Yeah.
odd to me.
So yeah, it's so I think we should just kind of start coming to concluding paragraphs or whatever. So
Yeah. Well, like Antoine still has to say his bit before we get into that.
No, I'm waiting for everyone else to go, and I'm gonna go last.
Yes, positive last.
I think I've basically outlined everything. I think this book is
Yeah.
basically it's wasted potential. There's so much stuff in here that could have been so great had it been handled better, and it's kind of depressing to kind of see all of that go to nothing. It's like so many elements that kind of hint at something more, something greater, but nothing's really done with them. It's just like they're just kind of laid out. It's like, Vader's personality is described, but not really expanded upon. Palpatine as this psycho manipulator who just does things for the hell of it, is established but not really, but it's established in a very amateurish fashion, and it just feels like that's how everything in this book is laid out. It's like there's a whole lot of stuff in this book, but none of it has any real substance. It's kind of a quantity over quality kind of book.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
I
so
agree.
Evan.
No, I pretty much agree with everything Connor said. It lays out a lot of nice ideas, but ultimately just falls short. And that really like irks me especially because I almost rather would have seen this book just crash and burn than to actually see a few really nice ideas actually be put in there, but then the rest of the book just have less substance. It's really that just is what really disappoints me the most. And this book was trying so hard to be Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, but it literally falls short on every single category that made that book truly excellent. So it's just really, it's like almost like the poor man's Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, and that's just really a bummer to me because I was especially hoping this book would be really great. So
Okay.
that we'll give ratings at the end. So I'll just save that for.
Okay. I don't have so much of an attachment in terms of expectations to this book because I wasn't really expecting much. As you know, I don't particularly care about the Sith stories so much. I don't find them appealing as much. Not because they're bad, but not my thing in general.
Yeah.
But so I didn't have much sort of hype going in. I would have liked to have been more interested a bit. The story itself didn't really compel me because I knew what was going to happen. Obviously, as you go along, the whole Palpatine thing with him not really doing anything. He foresaw all this coming and did nothing about it. Really irritated me. There were a lot of really great moments, like you say, with the character, like Vader doing Vader things was great. But then he was also dropping to one knee behind Sidious after a throwaway comment, instead of just when a slight incline of his head would have done. It jumps in and out of character too much for me. And yeah, that's basically it. My main criticisms are of Vader's personality in this and the plot. But again, overall I didn't find it offensive. The book, it was all right.
I didn't find it offensive.
So yeah, Antoine, on a much lighter note.
Hopefully.
Yeah, so this book, it debuted as number 17 on the New York Times bestseller. So I would say fans are enjoying this book. I being one of those fans. It is easily my favorite book of the new canon. I found Vader's and Sidious's relationship to be extremely compelling. I felt that they established very well who's top dog, who's bottom dog, and who needs to step up in this relationship. Like I said before, I felt like it had a lot of juxtaposition between a romantic relationship where there's sexual tension with violent tension there. So I thought that was really good. You got the space battles, for one, that we'd never even mentioned. They highlight Vader's piloting skills, which we actually don't get much of, even though we know he's a great pilot.
Yeah, it always amused me just to imagine him like in this cockpit, like hunched over his controls.
Yeah, and he's to the point where he does a thing where he force chokes at Isfa like upside down, which I thought was like really awesome.
That's right.
Through the ship.
So I thought the battle scenes were really good. I felt Paul S. Kim's writing style was extremely artful and nice to read. Unlike Connor, I actually read through this extremely quickly, and I could not put it down actually. I enjoyed the Rebels. They are my favorite Rebel crew. We didn't really talk too much about the other Rebels, like the other crew, but I felt like the interplay between those characters were very well done, and I felt like they were capable soldiers, but they also were a bit of a family as well. I felt that camaraderie there, especially when each of them died and things like that. But yes, it is a book I would highly recommend. I think it was really well done, and I think it establishes who these Lords of the Sith really are.